This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Your host, Felice Gerwitz, is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions, from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at MediaAngels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
Welcome to all of you who are joining me today. I am very happy to be bringing you this broadcast today about 10 things you must know about the origins debate. And, as usual, when I am going to be talking about the wonderful world that God made, it seems that, everything is not going to be working out wonderfully in the techie world. And so today was no different with, for the live presentation, our chat box was gone, as well as some other things that appeared to not be working. But I just put my head on my desk, said a quick little prayer, and we got everything up and going. We're starting actually the live episode a few minutes late. So if you're joining us in the live, chat room, welcome to all of you. And there is a link, as promised, for the free eBook, 10 Things You Must Know About the Origins Debate. For those of you who are listening live, I will be giving you a link in just a few minutes that will allow you to pull up that eBook. Well, let's begin today with just a little bit of background as to how this book came about. And, it's really a handout that I turned into a little ebook. And we first put it out in something like 2002, and then we had 2006, 8, 12, and 14, different versions of this come together. But what I want to share with you is how it came about. And it came about from people that would hear lectures that I gave or my co-author, Jill Whitlock, had given. Jill died in 2007. And when Jill and I first began publishing the Creation series, Jill was the go-to person for creation science. She was an oil and well geologist, and she had been an atheist at one time, and then came to know the Lord really through creation, and studied it for 10 years before I met her in the early 1990s. I guess it was like 93, 94, somewhere in there. And so when Jill and I met, she was really excited about the origins debate because she had been on both sides of the fence, so to speak. And when people would hear her speak, they would just say, well, what are like 5 things that I need to know or 10 things I need to know? What is the meat of the discussion? What are some things, because it is a vast study. And as I shared with you, Jill has studied this for 10 years. So it wasn't for the faint of heart, so to speak. So, how do you wrap your head around something like this, especially if you are, not a creation scientist? What do you do to get to that point? So, one of the things that Jill did for me was she would give me a list of points, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. So in this little handout that we're going to be giving away today, it's going to go a little bit deeper than what I'm going to touch on, and I'm going to lightly touch on these things because I call them the truths about origins. And, obviously for those of us who are Christian, we go to our Bible, we start there, and we say, okay, let's look at Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created. But what about for those who don't believe that God can create out of nothing? So we look at these things from both aspects, and especially because, my co-author in the Creation Study Guide series had come from a background of, what we call a nothing. She came from a background of there is no God, and if God exists, I don't care. So she brings to the table, a very different perspective than, let's say, someone who has always been a Christian like myself. And I look at people who don't believe in God as, wow, you're missing something. You're missing the richness of truth, that God does exist and that I don't have to do this on my own because I have a creator God who loves me, who cares about me, who knows the number of hairs on my head, that loves me so much that he died for me. Whereas an atheist or an agnostic is going to look at this and say, well, why are you even bothering to talk about creation? Because, there is no God, and we can see the evidence of evolution in science. So that's what we're going to look at today. So we are going to look at things, I'm going to call this a bird's eye view or a thumbnail sketch. And, of course, in our books, the Creation Science Study Guides, that gives you more of an in-depth look. Now, today as a special bonus, and actually I am going to give this bonus and this code for the lifetime of this audio. So for as long as this audio is up, you can redeem it. And if you go to mediaangels.com and you go to the Creation Study Guide, and it actually will work on any of the study guides. But I would highly recommend you begin with the Creation Study Guide because that is the first book in the series. And if you have not had a really good exposure to the discussion, I don't like to call it the argument, I like to call it the discussion of creation and evolution, you'll want to start there. And it is going to take $13 off your purchase. There's a minimum purchase amount that is required, and that will bring the book or the eBook down to $5.99. So if you order the print version, of course, there'll be shipping charges, but if you order the eBook, you can get that at $5.99. So I want to make that available. I was only going to make it available for 1 week, and then I decided, the Lord gave us this as a ministry, and obviously if I only wanted to make money on this, I would not make this a lifetime offer. So, on one hand, yes, you can wait, but on the other hand, this is such an amazing, thing to learn about with your children, because this is really, I call it, for those of us that are Christian, I call it, Christian-proofing your child, because your child will be able to deal with agnostic and atheistic beliefs if they have an understanding of creationism and what our tenets are. So let's start with the first one, and number one on the list is only God can bring something out of nothing. We do believe that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and he did this because he spoke it into existence. And the Big Bang Theory, is, as you can hear the word theory, evolution is a theory that's actually in point 2, but, there is a lot of different explanations of how the world came to be. And what always amazes me is that it changes, because science is a study of things in the world, the sciences, from a point of view that is observation, experimentation, and so forth. And so, in this regard, when we look at how the earth came into being, there was no one around, in the universe, not just the earth. There was no one around. Nobody was there at the point of creation and saw God speak it into existence. We have the word that is in our Holy Scriptures in the Bible, in Genesis, that talks about that. However, those that don't believe the Bible, and even some that do, will say, well, that's not right. We believe in the Darwinian evolution as, Darwin spelled it out. And then because Darwin also said that, we are, there is different changes in the species, and that the fossil record would prove that evolution did exist. Because of that, it turned out that many people have not found that the fossil record explained what Darwin said that it would. So therefore, there have been many different changes to the theory, and what has happened in that regard is that they call it neo-Darwinism or new Darwinism, and so they've tweaked Darwin's theory. As I've talked to intelligent people, which I know if Jill were here, I would hear her say it was questionable whether they were intelligent, but it is not for us to judge that. But, someone highly intelligent one time told me that he believed that aliens helped with the creation of the world. So you get all kinds of different things when you take God away. So number one on the list would be that only God can bring something out of nothing, and we go into that a little bit more in the little booklet, the handout that I'm offering. Louis Pasteur was a French scientist, and he validated an earlier work by Francesco Redi that disproved that spontaneous generation caused things to appear, and that's what they thought, that if you could put a bunch of cloths together, that you would rats would come, or if you put some meat out and it sat on the counter with windows open, that you could create maggots. Well, they learned later on when Louis Pasteur did his work that was not true. And, it is amazing that, it is a scientific law. It's called the law of biogenesis that says life comes from life. So in a nutshell, only God can bring something out of nothing, and we have a law in science that is not a theory, it is a law, and it says that only life comes from life. So therefore, an explanation of a Big Bang where, nothing caused something to happen, like this amazing universe that we live in that is so orderly, and God is a God of order, and so we can see that in his creation. Number two is evolution is not a proven fact, and for those of you who are scientists that are listening to this, please do not freak out, because I know that scientific exploration is theory, and the whole idea of science is not to prove or disprove. However, it is to show or validate a theory to see whether the theory holds up to, what the hypothesis is, or it will disprove a theory, as in the case of Louis Pasteur in that example I gave you. So what happens with evolution, though, is we hear it stated as if it is proof, which is why I stick to my number two, because we hear that it is not just a theory. We hear, well, of course we know that, the world is blah, 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 billions of years old. When I was younger, we heard the world was millions of years old, and now we hear it's billions, because that is the magic bullet for an evolutionist is time, because you have to have billions of years for these things, these processes to happen, whereas we have no theoretical evidence for that. In fact, the catastrophe of Mount St. Helens showed how quickly things could become fossilized. Jill, who was a geologist, always said Mount St. Helens, other than the catastrophe that it caused, was a gift from God, so that scientists in this day could see the rapid deposition of fossils and how quickly it happened because of what fossilization needs, which is extreme heat, is one of the things. So, there's no support for the evolution theory, and in fact, it is full of flaws, and there's a lot that you can study about Charles Darwin. I mean, he believed that living things became more complex due to, changes that would happen, and he did not know what a mutation was since DNA hadn't been discovered yet. And so he just called them, small changes. Well, microevolution, small changes it does happen within a species. For example, there are different kinds of dogs, but they're still all dogs. And so that is the thing that people get confused, and they'll say, well, there is evolution happening around, and it's microevolution. Well, evolution deals with change, but we don't find macroevolution. We don't find, one of the things in writing our Truth Seekers Mystery series, which were novels that my daughter and I wrote, in the third book, it is Keys to the Past Unlocked. I'm sorry, it was the second book, Dinosaur Quest at Diamond Peak. In the research I read, it was like, well, of course we know dinosaurs still exist today, and they are in the shape of a bird, and they want to say that the dinosaurs' ancestors were, were the birds. So, you're going to find all kinds of things that are really, I call them mind-blowing because, we feel like we are a people that are not going to be duped by some of the things we hear, but our kids are going to turn on the television or get a book at the library, and everything is going to be evolutionary based. I remember one time we were listening to something that had nothing to do with science, and they still managed to fit in the theory of evolution as fact. So when I say evolution is not a proven fact, and a true scientist would say, well, you cannot prove evolution either way, I think that, we need to let our children hear that when they hear that, of course, we know, and certain things like that, that they need to realize that the theory of evolution is still a work in progress, and they consistently change what they believe is the tenets of how the world began, and there's still a lot of theories about that. There is a second law of thermodynamics, and a funny story I like to tell is when I first met Jill, and she started telling me about the creation-evolution debate, and started with the second law of thermodynamics. I held up my hand and said, wait a minute, I didn't even know there was a first law of thermo what? And basically what that says is energy tends to even out all over the universe. And she used an example of when you heat something up in the microwave, for example, a cup of tea or coffee, which I do regularly. I don't know how many times I heat my cup of coffee up. I need one of those little thermo things to keep them hot in the morning. But, you heat up a cup of coffee and you sit it on the counter and it cools down. That just gives you an idea of like energy evens out until it reaches its equilibrium. So energy is one of the things that thermodynamics talks about, and so it shows that it is less complex, whereas evolution wants to say that this tiny molecule began and then became more complex. And the other problem for evolutionists was when they, when Darwin's theory came about, which, if you really study it, he wasn't the first one to purport that theory. He was the first one to get his book published, so it was credited to him. But I'm giving you way too much knowledge here, probably than you want. But, the cells were considered very simple. They had not cracked the DNA code, whereas now we know that cells are so complex. So there isn't, when you talk about a simple cell, even the simplest cell is just astounding, which again shows that, God is everywhere, and he's so, his hand is everywhere, and he is so, in tune with creation. And, it's almost like there's this hidden micro biology world that's hidden from the eye, and then with magnification we can see this amazing work that is God. So number 3 is flood geology and Noah's Ark, and we have a book on creation geology. And again, my co-author Jill, this was her love. She was a creation geologist. So we hear so much about Noah's Ark. In fact, our first website had an acronym that had to do with Noah's Ark, and we ended up changing it to Media Angels because it was a cute spelling of the word that no one could ever remember. But, Jill did a fascinating study of, flood history, and we can see that across many cultures and ages, the Mayans, the Incas, the Aztecs, the Chinese, they all have flood stories. Ancient Sumerian writings go into detail about Noah's family and the flood. And so, these stories that were passed down, whereas an evolutionist would say, oh, yes, they're just stories and it's part of the culture, it didn't happen. They try to say, oh, it's just like, mythology. But when you hear these stories passed down, and we see evidence in the fossil record for a worldwide flood, and that's what our book goes into. It goes into some of these evidences then you're going to find that, there is a lot that can be said about this. Did you know, and this is one of the facts that Jill had in our book, that ships like the Queen Elizabeth II have a different ratio of dimensions because they were built for speed, but there were ships in Great Britain that were built on the scale of like a Noah's Ark with the dimensions that were that were the ratio of Noah's Ark, and they were built for stability. It was a stable configuration, so it was really cool. So, and we see too in the fossil record that we see evidences of the flood where there were certain areas, especially, when we look at the places like the Grand Canyon, and we look at these things and we look at them from a creationist perspective, and we see a totally different thing than what an evolutionist would see. So it's really cool to me. Number 4 is evidence for a young Earth, and I know there are some people that want to dispute, well, how young is the Earth or how old it is, and they get into these arguments over years. I don't really get into these arguments. For one thing, my background is education. It is not science, contrary to what some of you may think. I'm not a scientist. I just knew how to use my resources really well, and Jill and I hit it off, and we were a great team. I relied on Jill a lot to bring, that information to the table, and because she had so many years invested in the study, she was a great resource and go-to person. So she always looked at it from the standpoint of, of measurement and what things, how many years different things were age dated to. And we can get into a whole different discussion on age dating, the validity, and how many years, carbon-14 dating really goes to, or the argon dating, and we're not going to get into that in this discussion. I have a class that I created for the kids, and it's a creation science, creation anatomy, and creation astronomy are all recorded, and I have not taught the creation geology one, and as you can hear, as I talk about Jill, it makes me sad to think that she's no longer with us, and that was her thing, and I think that's probably one of the reasons I've left that class for the very last one to teach. But those are recorded, ready to go, with a lot of handouts that go along with that, and we've even bundled them with the creation study guides and activity packs. So that gets into a little bit more detail, and there's different age levels for the kids. However, when you look at some of these things, like, for example, coal that's supposed to take millions of years to form, they find that they've done all kinds of research and work has been done, and it shows the rapid formation of coal. Or when, Jill was an oil well geologist, and she would tell the rigs, because of her science background, where to dig. She worked for a company and that did the digging, and she would say that, it was astounding to her because there wasn't supposed to be so much pressure when they drilled down, because if the world was millions of years old, then the pressure should have abated by now. And there were situations where, oil rigs would drill down, and those huge, huge pipes would just, burst out of the ground because of the pressure, and they had to be really careful. So, there were so many things that after she became a Christian and started studying the science from a Christian's perspective, the Lord opened her eyes to so many things that they couldn't explain. She couldn't explain as, an atheist agnostic. That later she said, okay, now that makes sense. And then, I alluded to Mount St. Helens, and that also shows so many different things that showed rapid deposition, and there were different things that happened that if you had tried to age date those things, that it would show it was millions of years, yet they knew what date Mount St. Helens erupted. And, our book talks about that as well. And in the little handout that I'm giving you here, that also gives you that information. So let's cover the fossil record. That's another point 5. You know, the word fossil comes from the Latin, which means to dig up, and that just means preserved remains. And they can be animals. They could also be raindrops and tracks and leaf prints and, you know, that sort of thing. And the fact is, if the Earth was as old as what they thought, there should be tons and tons and tons of fossilized remains of man. And there really isn't. I mean, that's why there's such hoopla when they do find fossilized remains, and many times they age date them incorrectly, or they will say, you know, that they have found a primitive skull, which then later on they have to say, and that's another thing, I think that's in our creation science book, that they've had to discount because it was either fabricated or they found out later that it really wasn't an ancient, relic. So, but in order for fossilization to happen, there has to be like the perfect storm, that there has to be rapid burial, there has to be something catastrophic. You know, if a fish died and it laid on the seashore, and here in Florida, I will tell you that fish is not going to be preserved in any kind of fossilized remains between the birds and, you know, just the waves. It's going to rot and disintegrate. So for a fish to be fossilized or anything else, it has to be completely covered, and it has to have certain elements of that to happen. And so, you know, the problem for evolutionists is that the fossil record does not show ever-changing organisms that they expected. They're not shown in the fossil record where they have, this fish that looks primitive, and then later on that it's, you know, highly advanced. And, you know, a living horseshoe crab looks identical to what they've considered a 140-million-year-old horseshoe crab. It looks the same. So it's virtually unchanged. So that's a problem again. And, you can go more into more detail about that. And we're going to take a little commercial break, and we will be right back. And I will give you that code to retrieve not only your handout if you are not here. I will give you a direct link for that, as well as the coupon code to get our creation book at a discount.
My name is Felice Gerwitz, and I want to introduce you to my publishing company, Media Angels. I have a heart for homeschool families, and since 1994, I have poured my efforts into creating curriculum to support teaching science, especially from a creationist worldview to the homeschool community. My curriculum was selected by Cathy Duffy in her 101 top homeschool picks. Another labor of love is a 3-book novel series specifically for homeschoolers with a creation focus, the Truth Seekers Mystery Series that I co-authored with my daughter Christina. Media Angels represents uncompromising quality, not only with books, but with an online homeschool convention and this ultimate homeschool radio network with amazing show hosts. Along with books, Media Angels has produced an American history and an American government video series, as well as a family Bible study, Homeschooling with Proverbs. It has been my pleasure to mentor countless homeschool families and missionaries worldwide. I also enjoy mentoring aspiring authors with one-on-one coaching and the Information in a Nutshell series. If we haven't met, please reach out. I'd love to help you on your homeschooling journey, or if you have a book, help you getting that into print. I can be found on social media and look forward to meeting you. You can reach me at MediaAngels.com. Thanks so much, and hope to meet you soon.
Hi, and welcome back. My name is Felice Gerwitz, and this is Vintage Homeschool Moms. And each month I teach a class myself on a topic that is near and dear to me. And today I am teaching a topic that many of my books at Media Angels are based upon, and that is creation science. And for those of you that don't know about me, and I didn't really talk about that at the very beginning, that my background is in education, and I began homeschooling when my oldest son had some learning issues. And I also have a background in learning disabilities. And so because of that, and because of my interest in education, I ended up publishing this series that, that only the Lord could have had a hand in, because science was not something I liked as a child, as an educator, even as a homeschool mom, but my kids loved it. So because of that, I ended up working as the Lord directed in this world of creation versus evolution. I really feel it's life-changing. I feel that these points are so important for our children. And yes, some of it can, make you be a little bit glazy-eyed as you're listening to some of these, maybe more particulars. And believe me, there's so much more that I could say that I have said in classes that I've taught for the kids. So if you go to mediaangels.com, you can find out more information about the books, about the classes, and also don't forget to use the coupon code as you're checking out. It is Creation Truth, and it is all lowercase, and you will receive $13 off of your purchase, and that is for any of the creation-based curriculum or the books. So you can get a creation book for $5.99 for the download, and hopefully that will help you in your homeschool journey. If you are listening to this audio and you missed the live session where we gave away a free ebook download that is covering these 10 points that I'm mentioning in more detail, if you would like to get the book, you can go to, and this is a little bit long code, so just bear with me. It is http://bit.ly/creation truth. The C in creation and the T in truth are both capitalized. So you have to have that exact code in order to get the book. So again, it is a bit.ly link. There's no www. It is just the http://bit.ly, bit.ly, which is all lowercase, / capital C, the word creation, capital T, the word truth. So creation truth, it's a bit.ly link. And remember, there is copyright restrictions on the book. It is for one person to use per family. You can make as many copies as you want for your family. However, I would ask that you don't put this on a website or any other digital means. Well, we're going to cover point 6. The heavens declare the glory of God. If I had to give evolutionists one thing, I'm going to step outside of, where I normally am in the creation evolution regard, because a light year is the time it takes light to travel in a year. So it's the speed of light. And so they know how many light years away different planets are, and the moon, and the moon's not, but the sun and so forth, how many years it would take for the speed of light to reach that object and then back again. And so we know that the sun rays, travel through long spaces to reach us here on Earth. So I'm not going to get into all that, but when you look at these planets and these things, they're just so far away. So it is, an enigma, but what we really believe as creation scientists and those of us that believe in God, we believe that God in his infinite wisdom and mercy was showing us the grandeur of his creation because he is God. So he could place these stars wherever he wanted. He could place them as close or as far away as he wanted. And so everything is so balanced. I mean, even when you look at, the theory of the Big Bang Theory, we didn't even get into astronomy and how some of the planets spin and turn and so forth. I mean, we've got one planet that's going, quote unquote, the wrong way. It spins the wrong way. I remember when I taught my creation astronomy class, I was really upset because they were calling Pluto was not a planet anymore by science definition, and I said when I taught that class that I was still considering it a planet. I'm not so upset with the fact that, we learned all of our little songs and we taught our children all about all the planets and that Pluto is a planet, and now it's not. But it was based on what they considered a planet to be, and because it's made up of so much gas and size and so forth. And they've even found some other entities that are past Pluto that are, are going around the sun. So, it's one of those things when you really think about it, and the whole enigma of, how we are floating in space, and the Earth is just so perfectly positioned away from the sun to be able to have life. These are things that cannot be explained other than they exist, and therefore we study them. And if the universe is about 6,000 years old, which is what we're told in the creation account, you would expect to see galaxies still clumped together, and you would still expect to see all of these things like asteroids and comets. And that is one of the things I recently read on the evolutionist side of the house, where they were saying that, creationists use this discussion that comets should not exist if we were billions of years old. And it's true, they say, that it is an enigma. But the fact that they believe that, Dr. Oort came out with this idea that there's an Oort cloud on the, very far reaches of the universe, and every once in a while a comet is emitted from this cloud. They believe that's valid science. It's total conjecture that there is a cloud formation out in the far reaches of the universe that nobody can see, touch, measure, that shoots out these comets. And the reason that we know this for an evolutionist is because we see comets. And the other explanation that the Earth is not billions of years old just does not hold water. So the number of comets in our solar system is a problem, because as comets pass our sun, the power that's emitted from the sun blows away part of the comet and it disintegrates. So if the comets will eventually be completely gone. So that's the thing, and they can actually measure the rate of disintegration. So even doing that, all the short-term comets would be gone in 10,000 years, and we have 5 million comets still orbiting our solar system. So again, this is a problem for evolutionists, but not for creationists. So that's the thing. So, and then number 7 is the oceans and the land masses. Evolutionists believe that the erosion of rocks is a long, slow process that takes millions of years, but you can measure the rate of erosion, and if that were true, we'd have no continents left, So you have to look at these things from the fact that, that there is a God and He is righteous. And so as we continue to study these things, and in the little booklet it goes into that in more detail. Number 8, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Scientists have tried to break down the mineral elements in the human body and have come up with a price for the various components. And some scientists say, the components in the body are just a few dollars, and others have estimated that it would be, at the time that we wrote our Creation Anatomy book, something like $3 billion. So, you can study that just as a fun thing, but, the body uses molecules that are, it's just astounding the way it works. And when we wrote our book, the Creation Anatomy book, there was nothing like it out there. So a lot of it was original research that Jill had done. And, there are some books now out on creation anatomy. However, this study really brings us to a deeper faith that, that of how God made us. And, the man who discovered DNA, Sir Francis Crick, was a strong atheist who believed in evolution. However, he was astounded by that study and realized that there was no way that DNA could evolve. And our book goes into a lot more about the DNA and the right and left-handed molecules. And again, too much to go into, but it really is statistically impossible for us to have evolved in the way that our DNA is constructed, because you have to have these molecules in the perfect order for it to happen, and you need both of them. So what do? Wait for like a random left-handed molecule to come along and then the right-handed? No, you need both. So, just anything like our sight and what a gift that is, and, how our nerves work. I mean, just studying about anatomy from a creationist perspective will increase your faith. Number 9, there's bad science and there are deliberate hoaxes. Again, not enough time to go into as we near the end of our broadcast here. However, there are some things like we look at Neanderthal, we look at Piltdown Man, we look at Nebraska Man. These were deliberate hoaxes. Neanderthal, they still say could very possibly have been a quote-unquote, fossilized remains of an ancient man. But when they look at the supposed ape-to-man chain, other than the little drawings that they have of an ape slowly standing up and becoming man, they have no evidence that this is indeed true. And the other thing that just astounds me is if we were millions of years old, as I said earlier, there should be huge fossilized graves of these, creatures that were at one time ape, quote unquote. And if you look at the evolution tree, apes go in one direction, man goes in another anyway. So, but look at these things, the Piltdown Man and Nebraska Man especially, and you'll find information about these. And then number 10, all living creatures reproduce after their own kind. God made all plants to reproduce after their own kind, and he also made all creatures of the sea according to their kind, and winged birds according to their kind. And, the scriptures talk about that, but one of the things that we really have to look at is even our classification system for plants and animals that we study in biology. And when you look at this, again, biology is one of the areas where they can really push evolutionary theory, and it just astounds me that when you look at the order of the world, anything that is mutated is usually a bad thing. Mutations don't work. Mutations are broken DNA, so to speak. But if plants and animals were constantly changing into something else, then the classification system would be meaningless, and we would really need to look at that again in a different light. So we know that God made everything from insects to elephants to dinosaurs, and he made each of us to reproduce after our own kind. And so with that, I'm leaving you with the 10 points that, are the must-know, areas to at least start with. And hopefully I've encouraged you through this study to, look at it deeper. And, I know there's so much going on, and there's so many fabulous curriculums out there that teach from a creationist point of view, and we've used many of these in our own homeschooling. I'm friends with a lot of the authors. However, our books are really a concentrated work that deals with a study guide at the very beginning that is a bullet pointed and outlined list. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head of the creation, the geology, astronomy, or anatomy, but the study guide's really for upper grade levels and adults to look through, and then we give all kinds of activities that you can do with your kids, as well as the activity books that are already done for you that are printables that you can use with your children. Again, if you would like to have a coupon code to redeem for our creation products, you can go to mediaangels.com and type in Creation Truth, lowercase, as your coupon code, and that should take $13 off your purchase because I wanted you to be able to get the Creation Science Study Guide, even just the eBook, for $5.99 and try it out and see what you think. Well, thank you so much for letting me present to you today. I pray that this show was a blessing to all of you who are listening, and I invite you to join me weekly at vintagehomeschoolmoms.com to join us live or for more information about our products, and also joining us at the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.com. We have an amazing group of show hosts that will bring you so many different broadcasts from everything from those that are helping you with your homeschool journey to Dollars and Cents Radio that deals with finances. There's even a series for kids. And there's also Current Issues in the Constitution, which is every Wednesday at 1:30. That is live. We have all kinds of broadcasts for teens. We have the Finish Well, Family Renewal is available. We have a radio show for Spanish-speaking families that is available, as well as those of you who love to travel. You'll want to check out Word Traveling with Jen Ranieri. And then we have those that are ministry-minded. Speaking Life is one of those. Rejoicing Daily is another, and Passenger Seat Womanhood. We've got couples, which Speaking Life is a husband and wife couple. Our next is Making Biblical Family Life Practical. Israel Wayne with Family Renewal. And I know I am missing one. Homeschooling IRL. How could I forget? They are an amazing team that works together to bring you, the lighter side of homeschooling, but some hard hitting. Co-oping show we've got Homeschool Sanity, which is great. Dr. Mel Wilson does that, and then Life in the Law with Christine Field. We've got some new shows coming up, Road Schooling for any of you who are traveling moms, and Flourish at Home with Mary Jo Tate. So, again, thank you so much for listening. Join us at our broadcast. We have new shows coming up all the time, and I appreciate your time. God bless, and take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and TheVintageHomeschoolMoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.